Hello, today I'm going to be walking you through an introduction to Access. We're going to build a payroll system with two database tables, data entry screens, um, a query to process the data, a online menu to select different parts of it, and a report to show the results. So to begin, you may be using different versions of Access. Everything should be compatible regardless, but the menu options may look slightly different depending on whether you're using Office 2010, 2013, or 2016. So to begin, I'm going to start with a blank database. Um, First thing I'm going to do is save it and give it a meaningful name. So I'm going to call it Access, spell it correctly there, Access Assignment 1 with my name, and save. This is the only time you're going to have to save the file by that name. And Access, each individual object that we work with will be saved rather than the file. So that's a little bit different than Excel and Word and PowerPoint and other Microsoft Office products that you've probably used. So to begin, we're going to create a table. By default, it puts you into data entry mode, but we're going to right click on the table name and go into design view. And we're going to call the first table employee table. By default, it puts a generic ID number. I'm going to change that to employee ID. And for the data type, I'm going to change for an auto number. I'm just going to call this a text field. In Office 2016, you have different options, short text and long text. In Office 2010, you're just going to have text. By default, it makes the field size 255 characters long, which is really big. For an employee ID, let's say we only need 4 spaces to store the ID. So the second field we're going to add is last name, and that's also going to be a text field. We'll allocate 15 spaces for the field size. Then similarly, I'm going to add a first name, also 15 spaces. And then lastly, I'm going to add a field for pay rate. This is an hourly pay rate, and I'm going to make this a currency field. Now I'm going to add some different properties here. I'm going to add a validation rule that says the pay rate must be greater than the minimum wage. I'm not sure what it is now, but I'm just going to, I know it's at least $7 an hour, so I'm going to put a rule greater than 7. And the validation text, which is the message that's going to pop up if someone breaks the rule, I'm going to put pay rate must be greater than $7 per hour. Okay, so I think we've done all we need to do for this first table. So I'm going to close and save. Now I'm going to add a second table just the same way. I'm adding the table. I'm right clicking there and going into design view. And this table is going to be called hours table. We're going to have the exact same employee ID that we had before, which would be a text field with a field size of 4. The second field is going to be called work date, and that's going to be a date and time field, data type. And the last one is going to be hours worked. And that's going to be a numeric field. Now down at the bottom, the default type of number is an integer, which would only allow for whole numbers. Since people can work, partial hours of a day, we're going to change that to an option called single. And I'm going to put some additional properties in that. Let's assume that on average people work 8-hour days, 8-hour shifts. So we're going to put a default value of 8. And we'll put a validation rule of less than 24. So the maximum number of hours worked has to be 24 or less. And for the text that goes along with that, I'm going to type hours worked must be less than 24. Now you notice this key symbol here. Every table has to have either a field or a combination of fields that are different for every record in the database. I know you probably don't quite understand what I'm talking about there, but for the second field, second table, I'm gonna select both employee ID and work date, and I'm gonna right click. Whoops, that didn't work. I'm going to right click. So now I've got both row 1 and row 2 selected. Will not work for me. Finally, I got the primary key option. In Office 2010, there's actually a button on the toolbar that says primary key, but you have to select out in the gray area to select two at once. In 2016, for some reason, I had to right click away from those two rows in order to get the primary key option to work. So anyway, I'm going to close this table and save my changes.